Closers Inner Circle podcast with your hosts, Ben Gay III and Denise Griffitts. Each week, we dive deep into the invaluable insights from the Closer series. These are books that are often referred to as the sales Bibles across the world. And today, Ben will share with you how you can get the Closers Part 1 and Part 2, and really all the other closers. But we're talking specifically about Part 2. And he'll tell you how to get them with free shipping. So we invite our audience, really, we would love for you to do this. We invite you to open up your books and join us as we explore the concepts that can genuinely elevate your sales skills. And in this episode, we are revisiting the chapter titled Sales Infiltration. And Ben has always said that this is the most important, or if it's not the most important, it's one of the most important chapters in the book, Closers Part 2. And this chapter is essentially for anyone who is aspiring to achieve sales mastery. Write that down, sales mastery, as it provides critical strategies for penetrating new markets while emphasizing the psychological and the relational aspects of selling. We've covered most of this in previous podcast, but we're going to do a quick recap and just to revisit because it's important. So good morning, Ben. It's Wednesday. I'm so happy.
Good morning. Good to hear your voice. I look forward to Wednesdays, as you know. It's one of the highlights of my week.
I will never forget. You get to talk with Denise and take the trash out. I don't know why those two things stick with me, but they do.
I haven't done the trash yet, but that's coming right up moments after the show is over. Wednesday is Denise Griffitts Day and Trash Day.
Well, tell our audience, first things first, where can they get these books? Because it's important. And I really think that if people follow along with this, they open up to the pages that we're talking about, they're learning, it saturates the learning curve that you already have, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely does. Today, as you've already discussed, we're going to recap. It's just a one session, Sales Infiltration. We spent several weeks on it, which it's certainly worthy of. But my concern now is we spent several weeks without hardly mentioning it. And sales infiltration is the key to being a master closer, a super professional salesperson, etc. And I've never known anyone who was really top-notch in sales who wasn't a sales infiltrator, whether they knew it or not, whether I'd coined the term yet or not. It's what they were doing. Jimmy Ruckers, I told him, the greatest salesman I ever worked with, salesperson I ever worked with, I'm trying to be politically correct in my old age, was...
No, because then I'll have to go with you, and I can't. So just, you be you.
Somebody was on one of the Napoleon Hill postings the other day was saying, something about this, if only he would talk about women and so on. Well, he died 55 years ago, before we were woke and open and before the women's movement and so on. So you throughout Think and Grow Rich, you'll see man, a man can do this, a man, even his catchphrase that you can be whatever you want to be, etc., is men is what he talks about. But that's not sexist. It was he worked in his time. I saw a thing the other day that sort of surprised me. Benjamin Franklin, the great statesman, one of the founders of our country, also had the first daily, widely circulated newspapers. And in it, it ran some of the ads, and this thing I was looking at showed some of the ads that ran in that newspaper, and it would send chills up your spine. He ran ads for slaves for sale. The one that really got to me was mother and son can be sold together or separately. And my blood ran cold. But that was Benjamin Franklin in the 1700s, I guess. And it was a different time, different era,
Yeah,
not justifying anything, but a different
exactly.
time, different era, different language. And I guess if you were going to have a newspaper then and didn't run ads on that subject, you won't have a newspaper very long. So time marches on,
It
and
does. And you mentioned that, people are, and I've seen it too. They get a little testy about, well, where are the women? Listen, I was raised to identify humans as mankind. And that means
hmm
everything. That means I
yeah.
don't make the distinction. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it somebody pretending to be a dog? Don't know, don't care. Mankind, remember, I have no filters, but mankind encompasses man and woman in my brain. So I just don't go to the trouble to split it all up.
Yeah, I find myself correcting myself from time to time. It's not in my heart. I just don't want to have to answer emails about how come you hate us women. Trust
Oh,
me, I
gee.
don't.
No.
But my mother was a strong-willed New Englander, with all that implies, and she was born right at the end of near the end of World War One. And the year she was born, if she had been of age, she couldn't have voted. 1919. That was the year that women got the vote. So again, different times and all. But she used to laugh. And people said, "Well, Fran, what are you going to do about this women's lib thing?" And so on. That was late in her life. It didn't start then. And she said, and yet you have to sort of know my mother to understand, truly appreciate it. But she said, "I was as liberated as I ever wanted to be the day I married your father." And what he meant, they had the traditional type marriage. She didn't work. He owned his own business.
She
She
worked.
ran the home. Yeah, she ran the home,
All right.
uh, and with an iron fist and so on. But she didn't need. She said, "Liberate me what? To go get a job? I don't think so. Liberate me to pay my own way from scratch? I don't think so." But she went through all the. There was a time when even women's lib was not uh, what it is today, and there's good news and bad news with anything. But she was real clear on. She married a successful man who had a series of successful businesses. Everything was taken care of. She didn't drive until he died. Then I had to get her lessons and everything so she could drive. And I said, "Mom, why didn't you ever learn how to drive?" And she said, "Because I picked up the phone, called your father, and either he came or he sent a driver. Why would I drive?" And if you'd ever seen her drive, you'd see that she was more right than she realized. She was she was a little short person, like 5'1" or 2 or something, and
We
they had a
call that
big
pocket
Lincoln Continental.
size. I used
Yeah,
to tell my mom she was travel size.
and their first car that I knew of was a Lincoln Continental, a great big Lincoln Continental, the classic old one. So when she would get in it to drive, you could barely see the top of her head. But so she said, "No, I'll just call my driver." Anyway, I said all that to sort of ease into a couple of questions we got, and then we'll go to sales infiltration when you're ready. Uh, One of the questions or comments in a conversation was, "Well, you're lucky you have a great brain and you make up products and services and so on. And what if I don't have that ability? I can't own my own business if I didn't come up with the idea." Listen up, sales folks. Selling is your talent. Selling is your skill. Selling is what puts money in the bank and your kids through college and makes everybody happy. It does not require you to invent anything. I've had a couple of breakthroughs along the way, but nothing that's a big part of my day to day. what I did was I was observant. I'll give you a good example. Joe Sugarman, old friend who's now gone, created the blue blocker, made the blue blocker sunglasses famous. He found them at a trade show. They had been developed by NASA. I have a couple of clients who sell things developed by NASA. One is the attic insulation, the super duper stuff. That was developed by NASA to shield parts of the astronauts' outfits and the capsules and all sorts of things where heat was injected into the environment. And two friends of mine, independent of each other, discovered that technology and built big businesses around let us come to your home and fill it up. Fixing the windows isn't enough if you leave the top off the box. And they sold NASA designed attic insulation under two different brand names, but that's what they were selling. Joe Sugarman's walking through a trade show someday, somewhere, and happens to see a good salesperson out explaining the. I don't think they were called blue blockers yet. I think that was Joe's idea. But anyway, they were talking about the sunglasses. Joe picked them up, put them on. Said, "Wow!" Instant reaction, positive reaction. So somebody named them blue blocker sunglasses. And Sugarman went on to make millions of dollars with the blue blocker sunglasses from a trade show of a product designed by NASA for the 100 astronauts. If it were left up to NASA, they would have sold or given out 100 pair. They had about 100 astronauts on flight status. Those are the only people that needed them. I worked with NASA as attitude coach for the Apollo 15, 16, 17 shots, watched 14 take off, stayed when I was there with the Harringtons. He was in charge, launch test supervisor of 22 launches on various things, all the way up to the space shuttle. And I never heard about those sunglasses from any astronaut, from the Harringtons, from anybody else ever, not in casual conversation, not because they were wearing them, anything. I heard about them from Joe Sugarman, who found them at a trade show. So among other things you might want to add to the things you do are go to trade shows of products and services that have some remote interest to you. I know several people who become millionaires attending the Las Vegas electronic trade show, where new gadgets and a lot of things, but the things that appeal to me are new gadgets come out. Joe Sugarman found the pocket calculator at a trade show. That's how America came to know you could have a computer in your pocket. Now everybody has one on their phone or whatever device they're using, but it came from originally full-page ads Joe Sugarman wrote. He didn't have anything to do with the creation of the product. What he brought to it was sales ability. I worked with a company who had the first Pong machines, Atari. They were the sit down in a pizza parlor and play on a screen in front of you and put quarters in the box. The first video games. They hadn't sold any of them. And some old friends from Holiday Magic and I got with them, and off went Pong and then Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man and so on. I was at the beginning of an industry, and the common denominator in that industry, blue blocker industry, et cetera, was they all had wonderful products, but they didn't know how to sell them. That's what you bring to the table, your sales ability. If you're an inventor on top of that, God love you, but you don't have to be. We built a big vitamin company as part of the National Toll-Free Marketing Company we had not too many years ago. And the reason we built the vitamin company is one day a guy set up an appointment with me to come in. I remember it was on a rainy Saturday afternoon, and he spread all his vitamins on the table, and he said, with your national sales organization, this is natural. And I said, you should have researched me better. I was already in the vitamin business. as head of Holiday Magic, we had Bob Cummings Vitamins, the old movie actor who was known for his healthy lifestyle and so on. So I know the vitamin business backwards and forwards. And I said, here's the problem with it. I travel, and I'm not going to take 10 bottles of something along on the road with me, nor do I want to be dumping them out on the bedspread in Cleveland. If only there was some way that it could be made simple for me. All 10 pills, we turned out having a Mega 10 line and a Mega 7 line, all 10 pills in one little package. He said, how would we do that? I said, oh, I don't know. I'm not a packaging guy, but you are. You package what you have now. You just did it wrong. Go find somebody who can put 10 pills in a little envelope. He said, well, how do we distribute the envelope? I said, go to the person who makes coffee cans and have them label it with your product name. And then when you do it, I'll buy it and I'll turn it loose in our 40,000 or whatever it was, distributor organization at the time. And we, in a casual meeting on a rainy Saturday morning, we developed a whole new vitamin concept. The vitamins had been invented. The little cellophane pack had been invented for many other things. The coffee can had been invented. All I did was sort of put them together. The answering service, when we started the National Communications Center, that was the first call center, toll-free call center in the world. We opened it in this little town right down the road, Shingle Springs, California. People said, oh, I was introduced somewhere at a meeting. And here's the man who invented the 800 number. Not true. AT&T was able to develop 800 numbers without my help. What I brought was that trade show mentality. No one had, 95% of all Americans didn't know that a toll-free number was free to them or that they could have one. And if they investigated having one, they discovered it was $10,000 a month up front for 240 hours of time. And at the end of the month, if you hadn't used your 240 hours, they went away and you had to put up another 10,000. Or if you were really using the line, then you paid a new 10,000 for next month plus overtime from the month it just ended. Here was my contribution. I was already working in the timeshare industry. What does the timeshare industry do? It sells you, there's various packages now and different ways to do it, but in the beginning, it sold you a week in a resort that you couldn't afford to own. You couldn't buy that. Most people who have a timeshare couldn't buy the unit that they use for 1 week a year, 2 weeks a year on its own. It's millions of dollars if it's right on the beach in some magnificent place. What I did in the 800 business was, if you were one of our clients, you used a phone number, 800-824-7888. I still have the number all these years later, and that was in 1976. Every one of my clients, 1,500 corporate clients and thousands of individuals, put on their business card or in their advertising, 800-824-7888. And we then sorted out each incoming call by an operator number or an account number, whether it was a message service or an ad, we were just taking orders or what have you. But we took the phone line that the AT&T had invented and combined it with the timeshare business where we all used the same phone number and nobody had to put up, except for me, nobody had to put up the $10,000. I just combined the two. I didn't invent timeshare. I didn't invent the 800 number. I paid attention to what a way to solve the problem. Joe didn't invent Blue Blocker or the pocket calculator, and I didn't invent the package stuff. Now you see them in all convenience stores and so on, not ours, but various people have, here's the 10 vitamins you need in this one little package. So get out of your mind that you have to be an inventor or be a slave to somebody who is. You just need to put things together. Here's another great example. The Closers, Part 1, is the best-selling, most popular, most powerful book on selling and closing ever written. It's sort of the backbone of the entire Closers series, which you're about to join with the Closers Part 4 on podcasting. And two of our other good friends are about to join with their book in the Closer series on how the importance of trade shows. We'd be talking about this morning. But flipping out little ads in the Wall Street Journal, that was my assignment every day. And then to find ads that could benefit from having an 800 number, but they didn't have one, which was just about every ad in the world at that time. I was going through the want ads, and I looked down and I saw something about closing. The ad was very poorly written. I wasn't sure what it was, but I guessed that it was a book on selling. It didn't tell me that. I guessed. And so I clipped out the ad, put it on a typing request, and sent it down to the typing department, word processing, to start a series of letters to them. Saw your ad, it would be much better if it had an 800 number in it. So there were 6 letters that went out. And just as I got ready to send it down, I thought, well, I guess they're selling a book. And I think it was 1995 back then. So I put my own personal check, 1995, with the typing request, and it down to word processing. Never gave it another thought. If the book hadn't come, I never would have thought about it. It was just something I did that I thought maybe might pay off. And I forget whether they actually joined the business as a client or not. That's not really important to the story. What's important to the story is when I got the book back, they did send it. It came in a package, looks like a child or a kidnapper had addressed the package, written in crayon. And really, today, if I got a package like that, I'd call the bomb squad and have them come open it.
I was just thinking the same thing. It's like, I'm not opening that. I don't know what that is. I don't even want it on my porch.
Yeah, white powder and/or explosions and/or whatever. But so I thought, I looked at the book and it was poorly written. The cover looked horrible. I flipped through the pages like you do when you get a new book. Pages shot all over my office. Of the pages that were still in the book that didn't come loose from the binding, about half of them were upside down. I thought, well, I've been screwed over. So I go to throw it in the trash can, but my briefcase, my Hartman briefcase that I've been dragging around for over 50 years, was sitting there. And so I threw it in the briefcase, put a rubber band around it, and I thought, well, I'll read it next time I'm on a plane going somewhere, and or see if there's anything in it. So I did. Weeks went by. I'm on a plane going somewhere. I open up my briefcase. There's this thing. I started reading it, putting pages in order so I could read it. It was poorly written, horrible grammar, misspelling. It was probably the most amateurishly prepared and written book on any subject I've ever seen. I'd never seen anything close to that. I didn't know you could make something that bad. But I kept picking up little nuggets of various tips and so on. So I started reading a little slower, and I'd read most of it by the time we got across the country to New York. And I went directly from the plane to a phone booth, or one of those phones on the wall, dialed the number, and I said, and I know I've told you this personally, I hope I'm not repeating myself to our audience, but that's all right. The point I'm making is different this time. I said, hi, I just read The Closers, and I'd like to talk to somebody about it. And this voice said, his name was Roy Brandley, as it turned out. Roy said, well, Mr. Gay, how are you? And I said, I didn't tell you who I was. I'm looking around, wondering if I'm on candid camera or there's some technology I don't know about. There was no caller ID in those days, least of all from a payphone. And I said, I didn't give you my name. How'd you know it? He said, well, it's funny. We got the rights to The Closers from the guy who claimed to have written it. And we printed 500 copies, snuck into a printing plant that somebody in our team worked at when the owner wasn't there. And as you might have noticed, we didn't really know how to print it. So it was a mess, but we ran off 500 copies of the closers at night after hours in a printing plant where the owner didn't know we were there. And that's, well, the problems are bigger than that. One, it's horribly written. It's horribly written. Printing aside, if it were perfect, it's horribly written, but there's a lot of meat in here. I'd like to talk about getting the rights to it, rewriting it, cleaning it up, and so on. Is that possible? You have any interest? He said, we sure do. I said, well, how many do you have? He said, 499. Like I told you, we printed 500. We ran one ad in the Wall Street Journal one day, and we sold one book to you. And your name popped out because Ben Gay. And so I know who you are, and I don't have to go count books. Printed 500, sold one, that leaves 499. So got the rights to it. Had somebody who knows how to do things like that load it up where I could work on it, and then rewrote it and turned it into the best-selling book of all time. Here's the point of the story with the vitamins and the National Communications Center and blue blocker sunglasses. Selling was what the closers was missing, oddly enough. It wasn't writing. Somebody could write anything. It wasn't printing, although it could have been done better. What was missing was the selling of it. I knew how to sell something. I believed in it. Once I got it cleaned up, I believed in it. So it went from one book written by somebody and then his partners, but one book written by somebody who didn't really know how to sell, to 10.5 million copies when we quit counting 30 years ago. So I don't know where it is now. There was a transfer of ownership briefly on 2 occasions, and I got where I didn't trust the figures anymore. So I said, what can we prove? And they told me 10.5 million. I said, fine, never even a figure any higher than that ever again. But that was over 30 years ago. So my contribution to Mega 7, Mega 10 vitamins, Joe Sugarman's contribution to Blue Blocker and the Pocket Calculator, my contribution to the closers and live and video games and so on, lots of different things, was the ability to sell what the product or service is, assuming it's a quality product service, competitively priced and so on, is almost immaterial. You've just got to go find your market. Like trout fishing, you got to go where the trout are. And if you go where there are people who want sunglasses that are really unique and special, or want a book on selling that will literally change their lives if they read it and use it, or if you're looking for somebody who's always wanted to take vitamins, but it was just too much trouble unless they took a single little capsule, which is almost meaningless. Those are where you, listeners, that's where you put your talent into the mix, and you can make millions of dollars off of somebody else's idea. And just be glad that so many people have great ideas and don't do anything with them. Your job is to find them, go to trade shows, talk to people, look at the fact it's packaged and sitting in the store doesn't mean they're selling much of it. Track it down if you think there's a little twist you could do on that. I'm working on a deal right now with duct tape, and I can't tell you the idea because if I just told you the product name, I'd give the whole thing away. But duct tape combined with the right endorsement can have a whole new life above and beyond what it needs. People will buy it just to have it. And I've got that. I didn't invent the duct tape and I didn't invent the endorsement. I'm just putting them together. So let me encourage you to do
infiltration. That really is, because you've been saying you don't need to create it, you don't need to mass produce it, you need to know how to identify it and sell it. And you mentioned NASA. I've got a rebounder. They're little mini trampolines. Depends on how
Mm-hmm.
many they are, what you pay for them. But I've had one for years because when I became a web developer, I knew that I was going to be sitting way too much, and I still do. And I would find that I would, stand up after staring at my monitors for hours and I was exhausted. My legs were wobbly and I was breaking down right in front of my own eyes. I mean, I never got really bad, but I knew if I kept it up, it was going to get bad. So, and you talked about NASA. Well, they didn't create the rebounder, but they did a huge study on it and they backed it. So you never know. You
There you
never know
go.
where you're going to find your information.
Absolutely.
And
And
get a
there's so
rebounder. You get
many.
to bounce around and go, woohoo, which I do all the time. So they're fun.
I saw one of those bouncy houses on the news the other day. Somewhere they had a storm, and it's one of those that could probably have 10 or 15 kids in it, and it was flying over a house. I'm guessing 500 feet in the air. And I thought, where was that when I was raising young men? That would have been fun.
No, that's like
Watch
that little
them.
movie Up, where that kid was in the house. I saw bits of it. I think it was a Pixar movie, but the kid gets in a house and the house goes up and up and up and up. It's kind of crazy, but I didn't watch the whole thing, so I may be dead wrong. But going back to what we're talking about with sales infiltration, you just need to be aware and you need to be curious. And once you're curious enough and you do a little bit of digging, all of a sudden you've got an idea, you've got a sales process, you've got something you can work with and make a difference. That's what I'm taking out of
Absolutely.
this whole conversation.
Yeah. And understand, you, our listeners, have the most important component. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of inventions. Somebody suggested, a congressman, trying to shut the patent office about 100 years ago. In his bill, he wrote, because, I'm paraphrasing, because surely by now everything that's going to be invented has been. That was over 100 years ago. So the patent office is swimming with great ideas, millions of them that never took off. Trade shows, or they wouldn't be in the trade show if they were already a huge hit and everybody knew about them. You go there to get known, to get in front of the right people. The element you bring to the table is
Right.
sales ability, and that's the most important thing. Is Elmer Wheeler, the great old sales trainer and speaker, said years ago, nothing happens till somebody sells something.
And that's one of my favorite things. And I was reading this morning, I read all the time, and I realized I read something because I like to read about history. And our president, Abraham Lincoln, is the only presidential person, I don't figure, that owns a patent.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Yeah, I'll
Remember
send you
what he
the link.
invented?
I think it was something to do with lifting a boat up out of the water because he didn't want to have to lift it up on his own self. So I can't remember now, but I'll figure it out and send it to you. I was like, well, that's interesting. President Abraham Lincoln was an owner of a patent. I mean, who knew?
That's
Now, is
fascinating.
it still
I don't
is
have a
it still
patent.
around? I don't know, but
I'm
go
not
ahead.
bright enough to invent anything, and if I did, I wouldn't know how to write it down and put it the charts and the graphs and
Yeah.
everything. So for me, I need someone else to do it. Going to a trade show to me is like going to being a kid at Christmas morning. I see things that I don't want, but I go, wow, who thought of that? Isn't that amazing? And so on. And your home is filled, everyone listening to this call, your home, especially if you have kids, is filled with things that were first introduced to the business world at a trade show. So there are trade shows near you right now, today, that are waiting for you to show up and find something that you can set on fire, really make it go. One last thing on from my notes from this week. I got on the internet into a thing. I must have laughed at something Bob Volcker, the great comedian, but he was a ball player, handsome guy, white hair. He was a mediocre ball player, Major League Baseball player, to say the least. But that's sort of the point. That's what he talks about. He held several records, most strikeouts, most times never got to first base, that type of thing. Most drops in the outfield he was playing out there. The reason I'm mentioning him and someone else, I happen to see them together also, but that was separate, is Johnny Carson. People say if you want to learn, study people who are really good at something. For those of you who are trying to develop a style and put somebody else out front, the thing people like to hear more than any other words in the English language or any other language is their own name. And there are many, many, many clips of Johnny Carson from 30 years ago. They all look like they were done yesterday, but from 30 and more years ago, of watching Johnny Carson. The humor is fine, but I haven't watched these for the humor. I've watched them for how he puts somebody else first. He makes them feel important. He didn't need the spotlight on himself every minute. When he's working with, who's the guy that gets no respect? Rodney Dangerfield, right? When he's working with Rodney Dangerfield, it was like they rehearsed together all day. Carson would ask the next question to set up the next joke. He did. How did that work out? That type of thing. He never tried to get the laugh, although he got lots of them, but he wasn't after the laugh. He was trying to make his guests feel important, look good, and boost his or her career, and then Johnny would benefit as a side result. Bob Uecker had the same relationship with Carson, and that Carson got him and knew how to set him up right. So I want you to study Carson as to how to become a sales infiltrator. Watch what he's really up to. He was a magician. Don't let him distract you with a joke. I'm not asking you to watch him for the jokes. Most of those funny lines were written by writers. He was just good at delivering them. What I want you to study is how he puts the other person up front, makes them look good, and so on, like a sales infiltrator does with a client or a prospective client. And with Bob Uecker, what I want you to look for is self-deprecating humor. I have a semi-sharp wit, voted wittiest in high school, and a lot of the trouble I've gotten in over the years has been based on my sharp wit, quick tongue, and like you, Denise, no filtering device. But when I finally hit on self-deprecating,
that's my favorite. Snark.
Yeah.
It's my third language.
Well, when I finally hit on self-deprecating humor, I didn't have to attack somebody else or make them the butt of the joke, and figured out if I made myself butt of the joke, they would be less likely to be offended. They'd be less likely to resent me or resist my presentation or whatever. And it's funny. It's really funny. So most of my humor is aimed at me when I'm calling on somebody. It's a great outlet if you're calling on somebody making a sales presentation via in-person, phone, computer, text, however, and you screw up, take the blame. We talked about this a little bit last week. Take the blame immediately, turn it into a funny story, and say, that's typical of me. Now you're not a threatening person anymore. You're not somebody you have to resist as much. So your homework assignments for this week are Google, I assume, Johnny Carson. I don't even know how I got on their loop. But Google Johnny Carson, and they're usually about 10-minute things. It's usually from the time he walks on stage, used to walk on stage, to when he introduces his first guest. And then depending on who the guest is, you might want to stay for that. He was a master. Those of us who grew up watching Johnny Carson and so on have zero patience for the current crop of late night hosts, or whatever you call them. I'm not sure who they are. I'm not sure who has the NBC, CBS,
No clue.
Yeah, I don't know and don't care. I've watched enough of them when they first came on to go, oh, that's so sad. Somebody should encourage you to be a cab driver or something. You don't hold a candle to Johnny Carson,
And
but
you're not
you,
funny.
yeah, you're not. On top of that, you're not funny. And Bob Euchre, is almost as good, but he wasn't a host. He was the guy talking about all the problems he had, and it shows you how you use self-deprecating humor. He turned it into a wonderful career, and you can use it within your sales career. I got lots of other stuff, but let's get on to sales infiltration.
And
One of my,
Mr. Euchre, I've never heard of, so I'm taking that homework assignment. Very quickly, I just remembered Abraham Lincoln's patent. It
what was
was
it?
an invention to lift boats over shoals and obstructions in a river.
Oh,
They
okay,
got boats would get stuck on sandbars, and he got a little tired of it.
sure. Yeah, that was in his day and age, before they were able to dredge canals.
Right.
That would have been a problem about every 100 yards in a river. I was in the Coast
He
Guard.
wasn't having it. So it never
Yeah,
got built, I don't think. And I'm trying to remember what I was reading at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I don't believe it was ever built. But I do believe there's a replica of it in the Smithsonian, so you can look it up over there.
well, I'll do it. And there's a great example. Probably today you have to redirect it to some new purpose, because they do have the dredging. They can keep the canals open and the rivers open and so on. But in his day, one log across a narrow part of the Mississippi River, that was it. You were done if you dealt with that log.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and the ships and whatever started backing up. So look for those opportunities, folks. They exist all around you. Because they're looking for you. They go to trade shows because they're looking for you. They don't know how to take it the final step, or they wouldn't be at a trade show. So do that.
I
Study
ever,
Johnny Carson.
yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
trade shows. The only trade shows I have ever been a part of was when I was a jeweler. And I had to go to the World Trade Center in Dallas every year and go to the gemstone show. I still have some of them. I mean, I bought some gorgeous, gorgeous stones that I was always going to make jewelry out of, but I don't even wear jewelry anymore. You just reach a point like if you work in a bakery, you don't ever want to smell another donut in your life. You just can't do it. And I'm that way about jewelry now. It's like, nope, no, thank you. But I've still got some of these stunning stones. And I don't know what to do with them other than just unpack them and kind of pet them a little bit and then put them back away. They're pretty.
Gigi started out clearing out her mother's house, went on eBay, and found some old postcards from over 100 years ago when her family were going through and did some mining in Colorado. And she put the postcards up and sold a few, much to my surprise and to her surprise, and at the price she sold them. Who knew there was a market for 100-year-old mining postcards from Colorado? Oh, Gigi
Cards.
sold all her stuff.
People are looking right
Yeah,
now for old vintage Christmas cards.
yeah, exactly. And speaking of Christmas, Gigi, who's drifted over into the costume jewelry business for Christmas stuff, she sold a ton of stuff the other day that was to one customer, hundreds of dollars worth of stuff. And the theme was Christmas trees, reindeer, that type of jewelry. So I thought, oh, Christmas is coming. I'd forgotten about that. So I was trying to get that package out to the car. But example, she found a whole business she didn't know anything about after she went through the postcards and a few other things. She was down to her mother's, not, wedding ring, but things that didn't really mean anything, the type of costume jewelry you accumulate if you live to be 87, I think she was when she passed. So Gigi started into that, picked up a little bit, went to a few shows, learned a little bit more. And now she is an instructor for eBay part-time. I mean, she does it when she can, when they have people they want to have taught by a professional, which she's become, because there was a garage with a whole bunch of jewelry in it. She's turned it into a business. I mean, a real business. And I was a little help with sales and marketing ability, but I know nothing about what she's doing, yet she's become a world-renowned expert in vintage costume jewelry and turned it into an excellent business. I'm thinking, who knew? I didn't know that was a business. I thought you went into
She
your
had two
local jewelry store.
needs, right? She had two needs. Number one, get rid of it. Number two, understand that there were market dynamics there and then build on it. And she did.
Exactly. Yep. So if you want your copies of The Closers, any part of the series, parts 1, 2, 3, and 5 are published. Part 4 is about to be published by my charming co-host on how to open it. Why don't you give a little commercial so they'll know what the book is going to be about and why they should be looking forward to it. Closers Part 4.
The book is about podcasting and getting your voice heard, but that ties into sales and marketing, believe it or not. If nobody knows you, if they've never heard of you, if they've not heard your voice, you're not sharing something with them, you don't exist in their world. You just don't. So this book is for individuals who want to podcast either on both sides of the microphone or one or the other, as a host or as a guest. It's for businesses. It's largely for businesses because these days, when I first started out, nobody knew what a podcast was. I didn't know what a podcast was. I got in there strictly by accident. It was kind of embarrassing. But the very next day after I heard my own voice in the first podcast that I had never heard of, I went, oh crap, because I hate the sound of my own voice. We all do.
Sure.
The next
Everybody
day,
hates the sound of their voice.
I
Yeah.
know. But the next day I was a podcaster because I knew that I could get my voice heard. I could meet people from all over the world. I knew that there was something I could do with this, and I love it. But these days, if you're a business, you can talk directly to your clients. You can talk directly to new clients. You can create new clients because you're now speaking to them and you're doing it with a podcast. There are so many different ways that you can make a podcast part of your business, part of your life, and get your voice heard. So that's, it's kind of the quick and dirty.
Well, it's going to enable you, listeners, it's going to enable you to start a podcast, be on be a podcast guest, promote a podcast, and how to build a business there too, because Denise and many of my friends who have been successful in podcast business have hundreds of interviews already, and shows of various kinds already done in the can. And they can be, I'm careful when I'm on a podcast like we are now, to not say something that's going to be totally, I can't always predict it, but it's not going to be totally out of date in a year, because this podcast will be listened to by somebody 40 or 50 years from now. You want to,
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, whole new concept. And I've done radio shows even before podcasting, but it was sort of a podcast with various people. Bruce Norris is a big deal, real estate investing. I did a thing with him. And I'm guessing that radio show was 25 years ago. And I still get calls, most of which start out with, "You still offering that special you did with Bruce Norris?" And I, in the beginning, had to say, "I hope so." What was it?
Oh.
And it was something I could still do for them. So usually the answer was yes. But that's where I started learning. 25 years ago, I said something casually. Somebody else is listening to it for the first time this morning and wanting to take action, buy something. That's with the podcast, you're building a legacy. Everything you do should be evergreen.
It should be. And you and I had talked about Earl Nightingale, and you had mentioned one time, God, last year, 2 years ago, it was a while back, that with this podcast, this particular one between you and I every Wednesday, we can reach hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people, literally millions. And I'll tell you why in a second. Earl Nightingale couldn't do it as famous as he was. The
Yep.
technology just wasn't there. The need wasn't there, but it is now. And I'll tell you why I know it's in the hundreds of thousands and the millions, because yesterday I did my happy dance all day long. I found out that my podcast went from the top 2% of the most popular podcasts in the world to 1.5%. When I tell you
Excellent.
I happy danced, I'm not joking. I'm not sure I didn't. I almost put myself out of a window. I was so careless. I was dancing around. But
Congratulations.
thank you. And it's because of you. And it's because you're my co-host. You're part of your partner in Success Radio. Ours is termed differently. It's the Closers podcast, the Closers Inner Circle podcast, but it's still part of my primary podcast. And because of you and my guests, I mean, I get to meet people and learn from people all over the world. You're my mentors.
Yeah,
That's
and you,
just
you
all there
get to
is
meet
to it.
you get to meet people virtually or in person over time that you frankly wouldn't have had an opportunity to meet. I've often said of the Closers now series, but the Closers, we'll use that in the generic term, has been my passport to credibility. Oh, you have a book published, any book that impresses somebody. You have a best-selling book. You have a book that sold millions of copies. You have a book that I've seen on other people's desks. That Closers. Yeah. Well, once you come speak to our group, there's 15,000, and sell some books while you're here. There's another, depending on the size of the group, there could be another 100,000 or 10,000 or what have you. It's your, and podcasts are filling that same thing. You can get indoors because into offices, doors, and people's minds, sales infiltration, because you're Denise Griffitts of a very famous podcast. And as you know, there's a large group of people out there who would kill to get on a podcast. Many of them have found you trying to get exposure.
They
By the way,
have.
make sure you have your ducks in a row when you talk to Denise about being on her show. She's not desperate for guests. She's anxious for good guests
High
who have
quality.
something to,
Right.
has something to offer to people. I was supposed to tell them how to get the Closers. That's the longest commercial in history. The best place for you people listening to pick up a copy of The Closers or parts 1, 2, 3, 4 as soon as it comes out. 5 and 6 is written. The cover's being designed as we speak, and 7 is underway. So that this isn't going to end. If you're looking for how to sell and be successful in selling, your search is over. You could spend the rest of your life reading The Closers. But get into somebody's program. Back when Zig and I were friendly rivals, people said, should I buy your stuff or Zig's stuff? I said, I don't care. Get on a program. We both know more about selling than you ever will. So get on Zig's, get on mine, half and half, but get started on a program. Being a professional in selling, a master closer, a sales infiltrator is not by accident any more than being a heart surgeon is caused by a walk in the park. It's a learned skill. The good news is you don't have to be all that bright. I'm living proof of that. I'm a high school graduate. Have had many ups and downs in my life. Formal education isn't one of them, isn't one of my attributes, but I got around people who knew what they were talking about, who'd written books, let me go to their seminars, sit in the front row, take notes. I'd buy them lunch just so I could talk to them. And slowly but surely, I became one of them. You know, I'm a legend in my own time, or as my mother used to say, a legend in his own mind. but I got to join
She
people
did.
that
I promise she loved you.
I.
The stories you
Then
tell
why
about
did
her
they?
just crack me up.
Why do they move every time I went off to school in the morning? You come back and you see the moving van going down the street. It really breaks your heart a little bit.
Listen, this is a true story. My mom, there were five of us plus four steps. And as she started weeding us out, and we all just kind of, it was attrition. We would move out, we would go to school, we would leave. And she kept saying, I'm going to sell this house and I'm going to buy a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. Y'all not coming back. She meant it. I get a phone call from my sister she was pregnant. She had pregnancy brain. She was hysterical. She said, I can't find mom. The house is sold. I said, you were at her new house not too long ago. Oh, yeah. She completely forgot that my mom had built a new house. She was freaked out. She goes, she did. She meant it. She hates us. She left us. I said, she's across the other side of town. Oh, okay, bye. Hung up on me.
See you.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Yeah, but my mom was serious about y'all not coming back. Nobody ever tried. We knew better.
My father, I may have told you this story, once explained my trust fund to me when he was gone, how I was going to get his estate. And his explanation was he would probably die at work, which he did. And he said, with any luck, I will have a quarter in my hand, perhaps my last quarter, and I will lunge into that candy machine out in the hallway. If you're there and pull the handle, you get the candy bar. I said, oh, thank you. We were going to talk about my trust fund. He said, we just did.
Did. Your parents are
that was
great.
that was the part of the story I missed. So anyway, where you go to get the closers that are in existence and the ones that are coming down the pipe is go to stores, STORES ebay.com/Ronzoni Books. That's all one word. RONZONEBOOKS. And there you can get this. Now, the advantage of going there, they're still signed by me. They're still dated. I don't know if that adds any value to it or not, but I have friends who fight over who has the oldest book. So signed and dated, lifetime money back guarantee, and you get special pricing at that website, lower than at my own website, and you get free shipping. Assuming you're in the United States somewhere, you get free shipping. So we'd love to have you join the family. Maybe somewhere down the line, you'll be adding the closers to your series too. And to make sure we sort of wrap up on sales infiltration, or at least my part on sales infiltration, the reason I wanted to double back to it was we covered a whole lot of other distinct techniques. This chapter technique is this. On this last week we covered saving the lost sale. Well, that's a unique, special technique and procedure. So we covered that and covered that and covered that. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, we're drifting too far away from the most important chapter in the book, and that's sales infiltration. We don't have time to cover it in detail this morning, nor do I have time to read it to you. It's 40 to 50 pages long. It is the best thing ever written about selling and closing. And I say that humbly. It was like inspired. I wrote it longhand on a legal pad. And from the minute I wrote the first word, I never stood up again. I never looked up again. It was like somebody was speaking through me and out through my hand. And I managed to put in those 40, 50 pages exactly what the most successful salespeople I've ever known do, who they are, how they talk, how they conduct themselves during the day. It's all there. So if you ever say to me within my earshot, I wish I could have learned how to sell. I never learned how to sell. You didn't read Sales Infiltration in the Closers Part 2, starts on page 257. And when and if we meet in person and you start asking me questions, if the answers are in that chapter, I won't answer them for you. I told you the answer. I told you where it is. I told you how to get it at a bargain price with free shipping and a guarantee that it would work. And now you want to come to a meeting, take up my time, and ask me the same question again? No, thank you. So the secret to your sales career is in that. It's in all of them. There's so many great things in the Closer series. But if I had to boil it down and say, all right, Ben, what do you want your legacy to be? It would be sales infiltration.
And something that your mentor, Dr. Napoleon Hill, really embedded in you is take action.
That's right. I don't know how many times I heard that, more than I wanted to. Action, Ben. Take action. The first time he said that to me, it was in regards to a particular business situation. Here's an example of the times he lived in and talked differently. Today you wouldn't hear this word. He said, action, Ben. Take action. You're dithering.
I know how to dither. Trust me, I can do it. I'm an expert at it.
Some might call it procrastination, but or afraid to take action.
Patience hard to spell. Dithering, you can spell that.
I've never forgotten that, and I've tried not to fall back into that trap. When I do, I hear his little voice. He didn't have a strong, manly voice by the time I knew him. He sounded like a little old man. But I hear that voice saying, action, Ben, take action. You're dithering. I don't hear Denise, and I don't know if you hear me, but
no,
I'm here.
I'm here.
All right.
What I was trying to say, and I had pushed the wrong button, is that next week we're going to explore another intriguing chapter that promises to provide even more strategies to enhance your sales techniques. So, Ben, tell us what chapter we're digging into.
You should ask. But we always buy from Joe on page 173. But we always buy from Joe. That would be in quotes, and you hear versions of that all the time. We've dealt with Joe for 52 years. Why should we swap now? That is, we've always done it this way, etc. And that's a strong objection until you're able to overcome it. And we will discuss how to overcome it next time, because they will make the swap if you make it to their advantage. If you answer the question they all have in mind and have had in mind since selling began thousands of years ago, and that question is, what's in it for me? They will turn away from Joe at high speed. There's something in it for them that they didn't know about.
Well, listen, everybody, thank you for joining us today and every Wednesday. We appreciate your engagement and your support and the questions and the thoughts that you send us. Very much appreciated. And a special thanks to Ben, my friend, my co-host, my colleague, Ben Gay III, for each week for sharing his sales experience and wisdom. Thank you, everybody. And we will see you next Wednesday. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, dear. Have a great day.
You too.